Let's turn our eyes to Scotland now. The whereabouts of a slice of the sacred stone of destiny has been in question. A piece of the ancient symbol of Scotland's monarchy had been presented to the former First Minister Alex Salmond as a personal gift in 2008. Alex continuously denied knowing the location of the stone, with it later appearing in a cupboard at the SNP HQ. Whoops, there was a lot of stuff in there. Obviously, it's been well looked after. But joining me in the studio, the man in question himself, the former First Minister of Scotland, Mr Alex Salmond. Welcome, Alex.
I'm very glad to be here. I didn't recognise you without your bearskin on.
Well, listen, I quite like the look of it, to be honest.
I think you should keep it for future editions.
I bet it's nice. I mean, it's nice and warm as well.
Well, so they say. They keep fainting.
It's better. Yeah, well, it's better than not having an umbrella. Now, we've got lots to talk to you about, and not a great deal of time to do it. So let's kick off, first of all, with this stone of destiny business. What's all this about? Why are you being accused of stealing from the crown?
I wouldn't pay too much attention to that. That's Alistair Jack, who people won't know, but it's the Secretary of State for Scotland, and Lord Forsyth, if people have long memories, used to be Secretary of State for Scotland a long time ago.
I remember him.
But a couple of clowns, basically. I mean, but the Stone of Destiny is the sacred relic of Scotland.
Yes.
Came from the Holy Land to Ireland to Iona, where kings of Dalriada were crowned on it, and then came to Scone in Persia, where for 300 years it was part of the ceremony.
Because it's known as the Stone of Scone, isn't it?
Well, that's why.
I always had trouble with the pronunciation.
It's not pronounced Scone. It's definitely Scone.
Right.
Just outside Perth, and kings of Scots were crowned there, and the stone was part of the ceremony. It was by which they swore allegiance to the land and the people.
Yes.
Now, Edward I, Edward Plantagenet, played magnificently by Patrick McGoohan in Braveheart. And that's nasty piece of work. 1296, invaded Scotland, stole the stone, brought it to Westminster Abbey, built a coronation chair, and his successor sat on it for 700 years to symbolise their overlordship of Scotland.
Yes.
In 1950...
So it means a lot to Scots who want independence, in other words.
Well, it certainly means a lot more to Scots than it does to...
You see, my father, from Glasgow, never mentioned it to me when he was growing up in London.
Well, see, this is the whole point, because in 1950, the cause of Scotland was reignited by four bold students from Glasgow University who, on Christmas Day, came down and repatriated the stone.
Right.
Now, note the terminology here. Edward I stole it. The four students repatriated.
Yeah, but how did it get back into your, possession?
Well,
because I know we're going to get into this one of the week.
In the process of repatriating it, it split into two.
They broke it.
Well,
bloody students.
No, I'll tell you something. There's an argument it was weakened by a suffragettes bomb in 1908. Anyway,
there's a lot of history.
It proved quite convenient because they had two Austin 8 cars.
Right.
And they managed to get one bit of the stone in each car and got back eventually to Scotland with both bits of the stone. Where do you hide a stone?
In a garden?
In a stonemason's yard.
That's not bad.
And a guy called Bailey Bertie Gray mended the stone.
Yeah.
When he mended the stone, he had a fragment.
Yes.
About a 2-ounce fragment of a 25-stone stone.
Yeah.
Which he gave to John McCormack, King John McCormack, who'd financed the whole escapade, and his son, Regis Professor of Law at Edinburgh University, Sir Neil McCormack, gave it to me in 2008. I gave it to the SNP after first checking with the Cabinet Secretary, no less, that the Historic Scotland didn't want it. So perfectly reasonable.
So you're claiming that you're in good order. We'll get into more of this.
In good order.
We'll get into more of this on Plank of the Week. But let's talk about
we'll do the whole... I'll bring along the fragment.
Bring along the fragment and we'll do the whole story.
Watch this space.
Watch this space, 7 p.m. on Friday. Now, what about this call that you've been getting from Westminster? They want to see you and Nicola Sturgeon down here to answer some questions.
Well, that'd be a See You Jimmy call.
Yeah, I nearly said that.
They're calling every Secretary of State, and what they're investigating, this is the Scottish, for some ridiculous reason, despite the Scottish Parliament, the Westminster still has a Scottish Affairs Select Committee. They have to find something to do. And what they've found to do is to explore the relationships between the London government and the Scottish government since devolution. So they've called... Can't
they just read the papers?
That's a good point.
Tell them, wouldn't it?
Listen, as I say, they have to find something to do. And so anyway, I mean, I always respect parliamentary committees, so I'm going along. Apparently, Nicola's going along. All the surviving, extant, living former First Ministers are going along. And I think...
Is this because Hamza Yusuf went to see Erdogan in Turkey?
I think this maybe is... I think the investigation was set up before then, but it's actually what it's about, because there's been a lot of spats, let's call them that, some of them really stupid, silly spats. He didn't go to see Erdogan in Turkey. He met him at the climate change summit in Qatar. And incidentally, perfectly legitimately, because climate change, believe it or not, is within the legislative responsibilities of the Scottish Parliament.
If you think that you should be sending public officials in vast numbers at vast public expense, I disagree.
That's a different argument, Mike. I mean, they were there, right? They were there from London, they were there from Edinburgh, they were there from Turkey, or Turkey. And Hamza met President Erdogan. Now, why shouldn't you meet President Erdogan? I mean, look, if you're at an international summit,
but hang on. But isn't the issue, though, that if you're going to talk to a foreign leader as a leader of a country of which you are a devolved nation, which you are not the leader of, as it were, or who you do not represent, surely you should have a conversation with David Cameron, who's the Foreign Secretary, which he clearly didn't have before we had the meeting. And I think that's the issue.
Yeah,
and they don't trust him. They don't trust him.
Look, there is a protocol whereby, look, I mean, the idea that I would have to be chaperoned when I was First Minister, meeting other international leaders is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, you could imagine...
Well, you don't need a chaperone, but he does.
That's another matter. That's a different argument. Now, the argument from the Scottish Government is they told... they had a guy from the Foreign Office who was meant to be there, but was off on his break or something, and couldn't turn up.
Working from home.
At short notice, working from home. Yeah. The London say, no, that's not true, and they're having this stupid argument. But I think there's something interesting. I mean, generally speaking, on this issue, and I may not say this on many issues, I'm actually on the side of the First Minister here. I think Cameron's letter was petty. But it was interesting to me that I think relationships in terms of these things between the Edinburgh government and the London government were at their best in the period from 2011 to 2014, where we had set the date and the timing and the format of the referendum. And therefore, we didn't have to use every other issue as some sort of arm wrestling.
But you were also very good, and I remember you doing it. You were very good at saying that you were blaming Westminster for things that they couldn't give you and making out that actually the reason you couldn't do things was because of Westminster, which wasn't always quite the case.
Are you saying I was good at politics, Mike?
You are very good at
You're accusing me
of being good at politics.
I surrender. But look, there was a fair amount of give and take. I mean, you didn't advertise things at the time. And, you know, I mean, people could believe this or not, but, you know, I actually facilitated the UK government getting back into the leadership compound in Beijing to talk to the Chinese government. Because at the time, it just so happened I had a good relationship with the Premier of China. And David Cameron and Nick Clegg were in the doghouse because they'd gone off to meet the Dalai Lama without telling the Chinese. And I, at the request of the British ambassador, facilitated him getting back into the leadership compound, which enabled, you know, what was a repairing of the relationships between Britain and China.
But that's a good example of working together rather than not working together.
But on the other hand, let's say I was going to see President Barroso, who I didn't get much change out of, incidentally, to talk about Scotland's accession to the European Union after independence, right? As I did. The idea I would take the British ambassador along with me to tell
But you probably shouldn't have been
school.
talking about that until you got it, by the way.
No, you know. Look,
but I'm going to get in trouble for
you're
running
wrong
out of time.
about that, because you have to prepare the ground, regardless of what side you're on. You have to, I mean, if they'd known what they were doing with Brexit, this country would be in a better position.
But they did prepare the ground. It's just that the ground
exactly. So
fell away.
I was preparing the ground.
Okay, all right. I'll let you off for that. Now, the big election year coming up. We've got to get your predictions for when. We think it's going to be in October. It can't be in November. So, who's going to win and how much by?
Sure, it can't be in November. Why not November?
Well, apparently there's a deal with the Americans that we don't have elections in the same month. Believe it or
December, then. I mean, the last one was in December.
December's too late. Never mind when it is. Who's going to get what?
Well, let me deal with that point first. I think it's in the interest of the Conservative Party to have as few people voting as possible. And if it's in the interest of the Conservative Party, regardless of whether they'll do whatever it takes to keep people away from the polls. That's what all this identification rubbish was about.
Right.
So if they need to have it in December, they go as late as possible, because no Prime Minister, no sane person goes to the polls 15, 20% behind in the opinion polls. He'll wait as long as he can. I think the Tories will lose. I think they'll lose principally because of the economy. It is the economy stupid, and they've run the economy.
But the economy might have recovered by then.
Maybe, but people are not going to forget paying through the nose of interest rates over the last. People are not going to present their look. That idiot Howard Davis, NatWest, right, saying it's easy to get mortgages. No, it isn't. It's not even just not easy to get on the mortgage ladder. One of the biggest house builders in Scotland went bust this week because they can't sell the houses, because people can't afford to get
Right.
on the property ladder. And the damage that's been done to people's mortgages, to people's incomes, to people's assets and to people's businesses is not going to be forgotten.
Well, let me pin you down there.
this
So
year.
Keir Starmer's the next Prime Minister, is that what you're telling me?
I think, you know, I don't. All that Keir Starmer has to do to become the next Prime Minister is keep his mouth shut and say as little as possible.
Yeah. And he wins by how many?
Well, I don't think it's land. I mean, I think
I don't think it's a landslide.
To win a landslide, I think you've got to win an election. I think you can win an election by default because the government hands you it, but I don't think you get into landslide territory without giving the people some indication.
Something to believe in.
Yes, something to believe in.
Yeah. It's an old-fashioned call, that, isn't it? Alex Salmond, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. You'll be